On October 7th, 1916, Georgia Tech does something that will probably never be seen again, winning the most lopsided victory in college football history, beating the Cumberland Bulldogs 222-0 in what was a revenge game for Georgia Tech's legendary coach, John Heisman. We're going to dive into how this crazy game happened and why on Daily Sports History. Welcome to Daily Sports History. I'm Ethan Reese, your guide, as you daily learn more about sports history and increase your sports knowledge. And today's trivia question to listen out for is, how many passes did Georgia Tech throw in this legendary game? Now, this game featured one of the most famous, most honored college football coaches ever, in John Heisman. That name probably sounds familiar, as the Heisman Trophy is given out to the best player every year in college football and is named after John Heisman. He was an innovator in the sport, helping it become what it looks like today, including creating quarters for the game and the forward pass. And his coaching career featured some predominant universities in today's college football world, as he coached at Auburn, Clemson, and Georgia Tech, where this story takes place. Now, interestingly enough, he didn't just coach football. At this time, many schools couldn't afford to have a coach for every single sport, so they would hire one coach to coach all their sports. And so he also coached baseball, which was very popular at the time as well. Now, he wasn't as successful as a baseball coach as he was in football, but during his time with Georgia Tech, he actually had a 62% winning percentage. So not great, but not bad either. And they only won their conference one year during his 13 years coaching the team. And the Georgia Tech baseball team actually is one of the reasons why this historic football game took place. See, Cumberland College was a Presbyterian school located in Tennessee. In the baseball season prior to this, Cumberland was going to play a game versus Georgia Tech. And they actually went out and hired minor league baseball players, some of which who had played in the majors, to face off against Georgia Tech to show how strong their baseball team was. And they destroyed Georgia Tech on the field, scoring 22-0. And this stuck with John Heisman, who had scheduled Cumberland College already for the next football season. But Cumberland College had disbanded their football program due to challenges of finding an adequate head coach and the team quitting. But they had already had an agreement scheduled, and Heisman told Cumberland College they would have to pay $3,000 if they failed to show up. So Cumberland College took whoever they could down to play against Georgia Tech, which mainly included the school's baseball team and anyone they could find that was willing to play a game against Georgia Tech, who at the time was one of the best football teams in the nation, as Georgia Tech was in the middle of 3 straight seasons where they didn't lose a game. In the following year, they would actually win the national title. So imagine you and a group of friends get together and go to take on Alabama or Texas. Chances are it's not going to end well. And that's exactly what happened in this game. And it wasn't just that Georgia Tech dominated. It was a comedy of errors and issues and things that could only be described if you watch the movie Little Giants, as multiple players from Cumberland literally ran off the field due to being scared from the other team. One player was even chased off the field by a wild dog. Other players would just throw the ball up or give the ball to Georgia Tech as they feared to get tackled. Georgia Tech dominated. In the first quarter, they led 63-0. They would score on defense, on special teams, and offense, despite not throwing a single pass in this game. By halftime, it was 126-0. And at this time, Cumberland College came over and asked John Heisman if they could shorten the game, as it was way out of reach. But they didn't. John said, yes, we can shorten it. We'll take 5 minutes off each quarter. And that still didn't stop, as they added 54 points in the third quarter and 42 in the final period. There was one play in the second half where Cumberland College had a chance to actually score, as on a kickoff, Georgia Tech's team actually outran the kick. And when Cumberland College player was able to catch it, there was no Georgia Tech player in front of him. It was daylight, and he would go on to trip over his own player who was looking for his glasses that had fallen during the play. That was their most positive play of the day, as Cumberland College would commit 15 turnovers, which included 9 fumbles and 6 interceptions. They would complete a total of 2 passes for 14 yards and have a rushing output of negative 42 yards, where Georgia Tech completed 0 passes despite the fact that John Heisman invented the forward pass. And they would go on to rush 26 times for 922 yards and 32 touchdowns. But Georgia Tech was not perfect, as they did miss a couple of extra points, including the last one of the game. Georgia Tech had just scored and taken the lead to 222 when they were about to kick an extra point. And Cumberland College came out of nowhere and ran the ladder play, which involves jumping on top of other players to block the kick, which they did. They blocked the kick to give the game its iconic 222-0. Now, prior to this game, the highest college football game prior to this was when the Florida Gators beat Florida Southern 144-0. The most recent team to score over 100 happened in 2003 when Rockford beat Trinity Bible 105-0. Now, Cumberland would disband its football team after this, but they would go on eventually to reinstate it. But they would go to the NAIA level, whereas Georgia Tech continued their rise and was part of SEC until 1964, when they joined the ACC, where they currently stand today. And after this, and in 1920, John Heisman would leave Georgia Tech to move back to his home in Pennsylvania and coach Penn for 3 years, and would finish out his career coaching Washington and Jefferson and Rice, and be inducted into the College Football Hall of Fame in 1954, in the second class that was ever inducted. And in 1963, 2 months after Heisman died, the Downtown Athletic Association named their trophy for the best player in college football after John Heisman, which is still done to this day. And if you want to learn more about Georgia Tech and all the ACC has to provide, check out ACC Nation, where hosts Will and Jim takes you through all you need to know about the ACC and what makes the conference great. And if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you never miss an episode. And come back tomorrow for more daily sports history. And did you catch today's trivia question? How many passes did Georgia Tech throw during this outlandish game where they won 222-0? And the answer is 0 passes, despite the fact that John Heisman, their coach, created the forward pass.